moving up the card, we got Terrence McKinney versus Carl Nelson. And I'm going to pick Terrence McKinney to get this one by round 1 KO in this fight. Terrence McKinney fights are always pretty simple to break down. He either gets the finish in round 1 or he gets finished in round 1 or finished later on in the fight. So there's no really in between. He's as round 1 or bust as it gets as a fighter. And I like it. And I think Terrence McKinney here is going to explode from early on. He's going to throw caution to the wind like he always does. And I think he's going to find a big shot on the feet and be able to finish Carl Nelson. But it's a Terrence McKinney fight, so you really can't have any confidence in him whatsoever. And Carl Nelson does have some pop. He does have some danger. He could absolutely also finish Terrence McKinney in round 1. And if the fight goes to round 2, I'm taking Carl Nelson all day. We've seen it time and time again as fights go on. If Terrence McKinney can't get that early finish, he doesn't look good. He fades pretty bad, and he usually gets finished. But I'm going to pick Terrence McKinney here to get the round 1 KO. Next, we got Mansour Abdul-Malik versus Yusri Belguri. And give me Yusri Belguri to win this one by decision in this fight. This is another very close fight that I was struggling to pick, like a lot of the fights on this card, like I said. But I went with Yusri Belguri for quite a few reasons over Mansour Abdul-Malik in this fight. And a lot of that comes down to that Cody Brundage performance. In that fight, Mansour Abdul-Malik, for the 10 minutes of that fight, was struggling to land anything on Cody Brundage. He was really hesitant, really couldn't get any of his offense going, and they were stuck in a very low volume kind of sparring match for the first 10 minutes of that fight. Then he kind of decided to let his hands go, and then the fight got called off by no contest because of a headbutt. Maybe Mansour would have finished him anyways as he was getting aggressive in round 3. But I just think that's such a bad look. We've seen guys go out there, absolutely dominate Cody Brundage, finish him early on. And if they're not finishing him, they're dominating him throughout the fight. Mansour Abdul-Malik came in there as a massive favorite, as a big prospect, and really failed to deliver in that fight. And even the fight before that against Nick Klein. I rewatched that one, and what I remembered from it was that he got rocked on the feet, then he came back and looked impressive. But that's not really what I saw upon rewatching it. I saw Mansour Abdul-Malik was struggling to land anything in that fight, like the Cody Brundage fight. Nick Klein was shooting a lot of takedowns, which was kind of disrupting his rhythm, but still, before Mansour Abdul-Malik got him against the cage and started just letting his hands go and then got the finish, he had only landed 6 significant strikes in that fight. So I'm noticing a bit of a trend here is that Mansour Abdul-Malik at kicking range during extended striking periods, he really does struggle to land any offensive at all, and is very patient, very hesitant, and doesn't have a good way to find his shots on the feet. And against Yusri Belguri, I think that could be very problematic, because I do think Yusri Belguri is a very good, very patient kickboxer at range. Yusri doesn't really overextend, doesn't overengage. He lands his kicks first, kicks to the leg, which I think will be open here, lands his jab, and then from there, if the opportunity presents himself, then he'll start letting his hands go, letting his knees go, and other shots like that. But he's a very intelligent, patient striker. I don't think he's the biggest finisher either, because he doesn't really look for it, but he will land damage with his jabs, with his leg kicks, and shots like that. Now, one thing I do want to mention with Yusri Belguri, I am concerned about his boxing defense. He has that very tall man's kickboxing style defense, like Israel Adesanya, like Alex Pereira, and there is a very big hole in that kind of defense because you're open to boxing shots. And we've seen it. Watch back that Azamat Bukoyev fight. Even though he looked really good and was dominating most of his striking exchanges, Azamat was landing some clean right hands on Yusri. And if Mansour can land those right hands, he could definitely knock him out. But as far as his striking goes, I think Yusri is going to be the one landing more shots. He's going to show his high-level kickboxing experience. He's going to be landing the jabs and a variety of kicks and striking Mansour on the feet. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the wrestling. I think Yusri Belguri's grappling has rapidly been improving from his earlier fights where he lost decisions from it to his last fight against Azamat Bukoyev where he pretty much scored every single takedown and landed really nice elbows to the side of Azamat's head, cutting him open. Also in one of his fights prior to that against, I think it was Slim or Sami, something like that, showed great takedown defense against an opponent he lost to before and didn't get taken down at all in that fight. I know Mansell has shown some moments of really strong wrestling, like his last performance where he got the round 1 sub, but ultimately we've mainly seen this guy strike, so I don't think it's been proven enough for me to say that he's going to go out here and maul Yusri on the ground. It is a possibility, but I must say Yusri, his takedown defense continues to look good. Training out of that gym with Glover Teixeira and Alex Pereira, we've seen Alex Pereira's takedown defense constantly improve, so I'm going to say Yusri's takedown defense holds up as well. And I'm going to say outstrikes him, lands the more damaging shots, and wins this one by a decision. But if he can really land damaging shots and Mansell starts to tire, which we have seen, he's a big, explosive, muscular guy, it is expected of him to tire out a little bit in the later rounds. A finish could also be live as well, but I would definitely lean more towards a decision. Now, one thing that worries me in this prediction, if Mansell can get on top, the guy has some devastating ground and pound, and Yusri is a kickboxer at the end of the day. He could leave some openings on the ground, and if Mansell lets his hands go, he could absolutely finish him with some ground and pound here as well. So that is something to take note of. But give me Yusri Belguru to show his better striking, his more composed striking, throwing more output, landing the jabs, landing the leg kicks, showing his constantly improving takedown defense, defending the takedowns well, and winning this one by decision. Next fight on the card is Julian Erosa versus Lorraine Douglas. And I'm going to pick Lorraine Douglas to win this one by round 1 knockout. But if he can't get that knockout here, he absolutely could be in trouble because Julian Erosa will give anyone a long 15 minutes if you let him. And first things first, the most obvious thing, what I think and what the odds makers think and majority of the public, is that Julian Erosa has some pretty horrible boxing defense and is very slow on the feet. We've seen it throughout his career. No matter what fight he's in, he's getting hit with flush shots on the feet, and he's been knocked out quite a lot of times in his career. He's been knocked out 6 times, 4 of them being in the very first round. And I think that is probably just the most likely and obvious outcome here because we've seen how hard Lorraine Douglas hits. The guy hits like an absolute truck in his Dana White Contender Series fight. First clean shot he lands knocks his opponent out cold, and he's not getting TKOs. Most of his finishes are clean knockouts. We saw it against Javier Reyes, who has had some success inside the UFC. He knocked him out cold with a big leaping left hook in round 2. And he's been on a very good KO streak. I think he's won 5 knockouts in a row. And it's clear that the guy has some serious power in his boxing shots. So, all that being said, I think the most likely outcome here is Erosa comes in here, his chin up high, bit slow with the defensive reactions, gets hit with a flush clean shot by Lorraine Douglas, likely in round 1, maybe in round 2, and Lorraine Douglas gets a knockout. However, one thing I do want to mention is that Lorraine Douglas's volume has been very, very low in his past couple of fights, and that's something that could be very concerning here. I think he relies a bit too much on the one-shot knockout, and if he does that against Julian Erosa and he can't find it, Erosa is going to be pressuring him back, throwing so many shots, landing volume with his unorthodox strikes and movement. He's going to be landing shots on Lorraine Douglas, and we've seen Erosa can push a very good 15 minutes. I'm not sure if Lorraine Douglas, with his very explosive, power-heavy style, can push that pace for 15 minutes. And also, Julian Erosa does have some wrestling. I know Lorraine Douglas has showed pretty good takedown defense, but if he starts to tire out here, maybe Erosa can get some takedowns, get on top, and have some moments with the grappling as well. So, I am going to pick Lorraine Douglas to get an early KO here, but if he doesn't get it, he could be in for a long night with Erosa constantly pressuring, throwing high output, mixing in the grappling, and Erosa could definitely get this one done as an underdog. Moving up to the next fight, we got Michael Chiesa versus Nico Price, and give me Michael Chiesa to win this one by a decision in this fight. Now, it doesn't take a genius to say that Nico Price is pretty damn cooked going into this fight. He's looked so slow. He's probably pound for pound the slowest fighter in the UFC, and that's not an exaggeration. The guy literally moves like a sloth out there. He has no speed whatsoever on the feet, and he's been knocked out quite a few times in his last fight. He just got absolutely embarrassed out there. Nikolai Verdetenikov was able to get that standing TKO with absolute ease, and he's not at that level anymore. He's took a lot of damage, and he's a massive underdog in this fight, and that is rightfully so. I think Michael Chiesa, the thing about Michael Chiesa though is Michael Chiesa isn't a striker, so that probably won't cause Nico Price to get knocked out here. I think Michael Chiesa Michael Chiesa has never got a knockout in his career, which is kind of crazy to say. So I don't think Michael Chiesa is going to knock out Nico Price, despite how slow Nico Price is and how bad his chin has looked. But I think Michael Chiesa will land the better shots on the feet. I think he's going to be faster. And I think he'll be able to get takedowns on Nico Price. Chiesa is a pretty good grappler. Nico Price isn't the worst grappler, but we've seen him get taken down repeatedly in fights before, like that Denver Gurimbo fight, like that Jacoby Smith fight. And that's going to be a hole in this fight that Michael Chiesa should be able to exploit. I think Michael Chiesa will be able to get takedowns here, be able to control him, get good positions on the ground. I'm going to say Nico Price avoids getting finished, particularly submitted though. I think he can last the 15 minutes. Then again, of course, Chiesa could get a sub. He is a pretty crafty grappler. But I think Chiesa instead will ride out a control dominant 30-27 decision here. But I think he is still slightly too big of a favorite. He's a massive favorite here. Nico Price is something like plus 500. So there could be a tiny bit of value there, but give me Michael Chiesa to win this one by decision. Now, moving up to the card, we got Alexa Grasso versus Macy Barber in a rematch. And give me Alexa Grasso as an underdog to get this one done. Now, if you haven't seen the first fight, I recommend you watch it to get a bit of a better insight to this fight this weekend. But Alexa Grasso was able to win that fight. And in the first 2 rounds of that fight, she fought very well. She was able to counter Macy Barber's very aggressive style on the feet very nicely, keeping her high guard, staying defensively responsible, and counting her with pretty clean boxing shots on Barber. And also, she was able to out-grapple her inside the clinch against the cage, getting good periods of control there and landing very good knees to the body in the clinch. And she was fighting very well in that fight, out-striking her, utilizing her knees in the clinch well, and was looking like the better fighter. Then Macy Barber came alive in round 3. She got aggressive. She landed big shots on Grasso. She kind of started to overwhelm her, and she was able to finally start landing good takedowns on Grasso and finished that fight on top and strong. But at the end of the day, Grasso done enough in the first 2 rounds to win this one 29-28. Now, coming into this fight, I think it's kind of wild why Alexa Grasso is such a big underdog. She's a plus 150 underdog, and in my opinion, I think this is a very close fight, but I think she should be the favorite. If you look at their careers since that fight, Alexa Grasso came on to become the champion, to have 3 fights with Valentina Shevchenko, and I know she's had a couple of very bad performances, that trilogy fight with Shevchenko, and that fight against Natalia Silva. I think they're some of the highest level WMMA fighters in the division. And since then, Macy Barber has really had a mixed career. She hasn't fought too many times. She's been pretty inconsistent. She pulled out of that main event against Erin Blanchfield due to seizures, but in my opinion, she probably just didn't want to be there. And then she had her performance against Karine Silva, which she looked decent. She got the victory, but that was still a pretty close fight against a much lower level opponent than the people that Grasso has been facing. So I am a bit confused as to why she is quite a decent favorite coming into this fight. And how I see this fight going is I think it's going to go similarly enough to the first fight. I think it's going to be very competitive. Barber's probably going to be the one more aggressive on the front foot, trying to initiate the exchanges. I think Grasso should do a good job defending, covering up nicely, landing good counter shots, and landing slightly more damage on the feet. And I think this is going to be different to the Natalia Silva fight or the Shevchenko fight, because those fighters were able to keep Grasso at range and kind of pick her apart and take advantage of Grasso's boxing style and high guard. Macy Barber's going to play right into that, and she will exchange with Grasso, which is going to be perfect for her to have success. I think Macy Barber could have some success with the takedowns, but I think for the most part, Grasso will be able to defend the takedowns and land the good shots on the feet. And I could also see Grasso ending up on top like she did in that first fight, getting some control on Barber as well and having some success in the grappling. So either way, I think it's going to be a very close competitive fight. But give me Grasso to look good in this fight, to show that she's not washed, to land the clean boxing shots, to defend most of the takedowns and win a close 29-28 decision. Though, one thing that does worry me, I think if Grasso does show that she is declining, I could see Macy Barber really looking good here and dominating her here. I think there's a possibility that she kind of shows that she's on that similar decline to Brandon Moreno. I know that's a weird comparison, but if you know what I mean, similar styles, both very boxing heavy fighters with that high guard. If Alexa Grasso shows that she's not willing to get hit, which she has to, especially with her style, and she's not willing to just throw down and throw high volume and is way too patient here, I think Barber could look really dominant here and potentially even find a finish if Alexa Grasso does show that, but I'm going to trust in Alexa Grasso to look like a good version of herself, show why she was the former champion, be able to edge out a decision in this fight. Next fight on the card, Joe Pyfer versus Israel Adesanya, and give me Israel Adesanya to win this one by a decision. But this is another one of those very close fights where I had to really think about who I'm going to predict. Now, I don't think I'm going to need to spend too long on the breakdown here because anyone with a decent fight IQ that knows MMA knows how this fight will most likely go. It's either going to be Joe Pyfer by an early KO or Israel Adesanya by a decision or maybe a later rounds KO here. I want to mention Israel Adesanya doesn't have the most momentum going into this fight and a lot of people are calling him washed. But I don't think that's the case. I think he's just been fighting very good middleweights that even in his prime would have given him a lot of problems. You look at that Strickland fight, I think that's a stylistic nightmare considering the boxing and the pressure of Strickland. And I do think it was a bit of an off night from Izzy in that fight. I'm not saying that Izzy wouldn't lose to Strickland again, but I do think that Strickland is probably his worst matchup besides like maybe Hamza Chimaev or another grappling heavy fighter. And I think Izzy was a bit off in that fight. Then that DDP fight. I thought Izzy looked really good in that fight. I thought he had a lot of good moments. I thought he was looking like he was on his way to winning that fight, but then DDP got the takedown. A bit of a weird finish there, which is a bit concerning for Izzy. But nevertheless, I thought Izzy looked as good as he did in his prime. He looked slick on the feet, and he looked like a good version of himself. Then in that Amarvo fight, I don't think it's reasonable to say that Izzy looked washed in there either. I think he looked great in round one, was fighting very effectively, but Amarvo timed a beautiful boxing blitz, and those holes in Izzy's game, in his boxing defense, were evident throughout his career. He had always extended his arms like that, not really blocking properly, and Amarvo made a good read and was able to knock him out. So either way, in all of his past performances, I think Izzy's looked pretty good and hasn't really shown to be washed despite losing. Yes, I don't think he is as in his peak of his title reign, but I think he's going to still come in here as a good version of himself. Now, Joe Pyfer hits like a truck. You don't need to explain that. If you just watch him, you know how hard he hits. So I think, especially since Izzy's coming off the longest layoff of his career, round one is going to be dangerous here because of Joe Pyfer's big power and Izzy's boxing defensive holes and him being on a bit of a layoff. I think if Joe Pyfer can pressure forward, time that shot, he could absolutely knock Israel Adesanya out, and that is a real possibility, and that is why this fight is so interesting. But if he can't do that, honestly, I think Izzy should have a field day with this guy. Like anyone can really tell, just watch their fights. Izzy is so much more high level than Joe Pyfer. I don't think Joe Pyfer has much of a tool bag on the feet at all besides the big right hand, big left hook. As fights go on, his striking is extremely limited and he's pretty damn one-dimensional. We've seen that in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, where in rounds 2 and 3, it was a very close fight, and Kelvin was kind of, if that fight was 5 rounds, who knows what could have happened, because Kelvin was kind of coming on there, landing some shots, and Pyfer just looked kind of tired and not really landing anything as that fight went on, and that was a really bad version of Kelvin Gastelum, and we've already seen it with Jack Manson. He looked good early, Joe Pyfer, but when the fight went on, Jack Manson was really starting to piece him up, land leg kicks, land jabs, and if Jack Manson can do that, imagine what Izzy can do, because Izzy's going to be landing those leg kicks, landing those jabs, and he's one of the best point fight strikers we've ever seen in the UFC. So if this fight goes on, I expect Izzy to outstrike Joe Pyfer pretty easily and probably win by a decision, but could even find a finish, especially in the later rounds, especially if he starts to accumulate damage and Joe Pyfer starts to tire out. Now, I do want to mention the grappling because I think the grappling is a big unknown going into this fight and something that we're going to have to kind of assume it going into this prediction for this fight. And I'm going to assume that Israel Adesanya's grappling defense holds up fairly well. We've seen throughout his career he has pretty solid takedown defense, especially up against the cage. And we've seen in that Amarvo fight, his takedown defense looked very good in that fight. Amarvo was shooting some good takedowns, but he looked very strong. And in that DDP fight, he did get taken down a couple times. He ultimately got finished on the ground, but he also showed some good takedown defense in that fight as well. And Joe Pyfer, his grappling is kind of unknown to me as well. We've seen some really good moments of him where he's able to take down his opponents, slam them down, and be able to find submissions. But most of that is against lower levels of competition. Against Jack Manson, he didn't have any success grappling. Kelvin Gastelum, I think he took him down once, but KG got right back up to his feet. And in his last fight against Abus Magomedov, he got controlled on the ground in that first round, but then he was able to get the fight to the ground after knocking him down and got a submission. So going into this fight against Israel Adesanya, there is a world where Joe Pyfer just shows levels with the grappling, shows that he can take down Izzy at will and just control him there, potentially winning by a decision, controlling him for all 5 rounds of that fight, or more likely find a submission on Israel Adesanya on the ground if he gets it there. But I'm going to say Izzy's takedown defense holds up because we haven't really seen Joe Pyfer consistently dominate higher level opponents, especially with his grappling, or go to his grappling in his fights. So I'm going to say Israel Adesanya's takedown defense holds up, and this is going to be a striking match. And for my final prediction, yes, I know it is very live. Joe Pyfer can get an early KO here, but I think you got to trust in Izzy to look good and to come in here and to be able to show the level of striker that he is, which I think is at least a level above Joe Pyfer, and be able to win this one, land the better shots on the feet, and to win this one by decision. So that is going to be my prediction. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this card, what you think about my predictions, and what are your best predictions for this card. And remember, if you want all of my bets, click the link in the bio or in the comments down below, and let's make some money this weekend. Let's go.